There are folks, there we go. There are folks who can't join us directly. So the first thing I'm going to do, I introduced myself a second ago, but for those just joining, my name is Josh Hadro. I'm the managing director of the IIIF Consortium. And I'm going to do, I think, most of the talking here today, but before I dive into it, I'm going to put my colleagues on the spot real quick. If Meg and Glenn could introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. It's just, I think, nice to have folks know who all is part of the IIIF Consortium. Who wants to go first?
I'll go. Hi, I'm Meg O'Hearn. I'm the Community and Events Coordinator for IIIF, and I am calling in from New York as well.
Thanks, Meg.
Hi, I'm Glenn Robson. I'm the IIIF Technical Coordinator. So my main role is to help people implement IIIF and to help with the developments of the standards. And I'm calling in from Aberystwyth in West Wales.
Great. All right, thanks, Glenn. So let me share my screen here and we will dive into it. So this is the first time, let me get the right screen here. Hopefully you can now see the right set of slides. Is that right? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Is it still loading? Okay. Let me see if I can get the chat window open at the same time. Perfect. Okay. So I think you can all see that now. And basically what we want to do, this is the first time we've done this in this particular way, but this is kind of a welcome and a newcomer session. IIIF community has grown tremendously over the last few years, particularly just in the last few years. And so, you know, we're just really eager to kind of repeatedly give ways of, for people to get familiarized with the way that the community groups work and the way that the different aspects of IIIF work and how we kind of make progress towards some of these new things. So I'm going to go through some slides. Some of you may have seen some of these before, but I think this is a really useful moment to get us all on the same page as we go into the working meeting for the next few days of this week. As I said, this is kind of the first time we've done it exactly like this. So I want to leave a bunch of time for questions. So by all means, put the questions in the chat as I'm talking, as you think of them. And we'll talk about them at the end. And hopefully, yeah, this will be a good introduction for you and a great way to kind of start the working meeting week. So let's dive into it. This is what we'll talk about, kind of what are a bunch of different things. So what is IIIF? What is the difference between the community and the consortium? And then a couple pieces about how you can get involved and different ways to get started individually and at the institution level. So why don't we start with the big question, right? At the most basic level, what is IIIF? IIIF, surely you've heard that acronym. I've said it a bunch of times just in the last few minutes. What it stands for is the International Image Interoperability Framework. And that is a set of open standards and APIs that describe how to bring together digital objects. But because that's a mouthful, we usually just say IIIF. And maybe in a more useful way, this is kind of what I was just saying. It is itself a model for presenting and annotating content like images and audio files. And because it's premised on an open standard, just a completely open way of doing these things, all these other benefits accrue when a lot of different institutions start doing the same task in the same way. You start being able to build and scaffold tools on that open set of specifications. And so you start benefiting from the work that other institutions are doing. And so a big piece of that, not only are we talking about the APIs and the model, every time we talk about IIIF, we're also very much talking about the community of people that actually make that work, who are developing the APIs, presenting use cases, and then implementing those things in software and making their materials available online. And so very much you are now part of the global IIIF community that we're talking about. Joining this meeting and participating in the events of this week is exactly how we make progress in all these different areas. So you can see here is just a map of the places that we know about that are using IIIF. So the red dots on this map are implementations of one kind or another. The blue dots on this map are actually members of the IIIF consortium. So these are institutions that quite literally support the work of this community financially and make a contribution each year to help put on events like this, to do trainings and other kind of important things for making the specifications work year in and year out. And so we absolutely know that that map is outdated. We know that there are places using IIIF that we're not aware of. And so we'd love for you to get in touch with us. You can see the map there at bit.ly/IIIF map. You can take a look and see if your institution is represented. And if it's not, please get in touch with us. We'd love to add a dot to the map, and we're happy to do that. So you can email us at events@iif.io or any number of ways and help us add a dot to the map. So another way, I mean, dots on the map is fun, but I think this is one of my favorite pictures. This is the last time we were able to have our annual conference. And so this is a picture of the IIIF Annual Conference that happened in Göttingen, Germany in June of 2019. It was, I believe, one of the hottest weeks on record in recorded weather history. We were in a medieval building, and it was kind of an amazing conference, and also just an extremely kind of hot weather conference. But all these people got together in a room to do similar things to what we're doing here at the working meeting. And so it's people in a room making progress, but it's also very much institutional support that makes the IIIF community work. And so you can see examples here of different areas, different places and kinds of institutions that are making this kind of aggregate effort work. So museums and galleries, universities, research centers, state and national libraries, and increasingly seeing a lot of work from aggregators and other software providers and storers like ArtStore, Content DM, Europeana, DPLA, that are actually ways that smaller institutions are also able to kind of participate and make use of some of the IIIF materials and work. And if you are here, you probably have some sense of how IIIF is used and where and how it's used. But just to give you a sense of some of the ways that we've seen it used in the last couple of years, it definitely started out in kind of library and research settings, but we've seen a ton of expansion into more of a museum context, so curatorial and education uses, art historical explorations. Seeing more direct use from researchers and scholars, faculty members at different institutions, and somewhat related to that, also teaching and instruction. So not just in kind of higher education settings, but in, for example, like high schools and secondary schools, seeing instructors using IIIF materials to illustrate primary sources and other important elements of educational pedagogical settings. Digital humanities projects, we're seeing more and more use of IIIF as part of a pipeline that feeds into artificial intelligence and machine learning projects, and some really exciting work starting to get outside of just the cultural heritage domain, but seeing it in science, technology, engineering, and medical contexts. So bioimaging, life sciences, those contexts where you have maybe thousands of slides of MRI projections, things like that. Very much similar use cases to the way that IIIF evolved out of the museum and library side of the community. And so I think this is an important one. So you found your way here to our welcome session as part of the IIIF working meeting. There are historically kind of some classic rituals that the IIIF community has. And so the two big ones in terms of events are the major conferences. So we have traditionally done a big annual conference in the spring, and that goes back and forth, or at least it has, from Europe to North America, but we're exploring and eager to figure out other places to host that event, of course, assuming that we can go back to in-person meetings before too long. And then what we're doing now is the working meeting. So we do the conference in the spring, and then and the other half of the year, we like to host an event like this one to really make progress. It's a little bit more specific. Generally, the sessions are about use cases or very specific questions or things we can do to make progress in implementing or paving the way for implementations of IIIF. And so that's kind of this event here, although this is the first time we're doing it completely online. And so we're happy to have you joining us along with this experiment. And in addition to those two big sort of high level annual events, there are also throughout the year an increasing number of local community events. So we're seeing individuals in different regions host local events for their communities. So we've seen events like this happening in Japan, on online events in China. We've seen local events in places like France and Brazil and others. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity there. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, we can definitely help you with some documents and some best practices about how to put on local community events. And we're also getting into, we'll talk more about this in the plenary session that comes after this, but online training sessions that we're doing that the IIIF Consortium is actually putting on. So we've had 3 formal ones in 2020, plus one that was associated with our annual conference. And those are really great ways, either for you or if you have colleagues interested in getting kind of a week-long, a couple hours a day, hands-on experience working with IIIF and really starting from the beginning and working up to some more complex interactions. And then the last piece I'll mention about some of the rituals, we do community calls. So we have general topic community calls that happen roughly twice a month. But we also have, and I'll get into this, a number of different community groups that host a number of calls throughout the year. So the rhythm of those changes, but often those groups meet once a month or once a quarter. And so every week, in any given week, there are a number of different calls that you could join that maybe align with your interests. And so here's a snapshot of some of the next set of things that we'll talk about. This is kind of an image describing a community landscape. And so you can see here, this describes over on the right-hand side, a lot of the different groups. So there's community groups and technical groups that I'll go through in just a minute. And that kind of overlaps with all the other different aspects of the community. So there's the software providers and the people creating and working on image viewers and material viewers and institutional adopters. And then, as I mentioned, that IIIF consortium piece, the institutions that are actually financially supporting the work of the community. So let's dive into a few of these specifics. We'll talk about the community groups and then the slightly different formulation, which we call technical specification groups. Then we have a group of editors who kind of shepherd the work of the API specifications and our coordinating committee. So the community groups are interest groups. They're groups that formed because of interest in the community, and there were enough people to host regular calls and to talk very specifically about these different topical domains and elements. So the community groups we have right now include 3D, so working with 3D assets, and it's not yet an official part of the IIIF APIs, but the 3D community group is doing a lot of the important work of trying to build consensus and lay the groundwork for all the things we need to do to be able to then eventually take on more technical work related to 3D applications. Archives community group, the Discovery for Humans community group is really focused on things like the user experience of IIIF work. Manuscripts is one of the longest standing groups, really taking a look at kind of medieval manuscripts in that community of presentation, presenting digitized materials online. One of the newer groups is the Maps community group. So looking at all the intersections of how IIIF content might be associated with geographic places and literally embedded in a map or geo-rectified, things like that. We have the museums community group, which is an exciting place to look at all the great interactions. It's very much about new museums doing interesting presentations of their online collections using IIIF. We have the newspapers community group, looking at that particular content type, and then the outreach community group, which helps do work to spread the word about IIIF all around. And then we have this idea of the technical specification groups. And so these groups have a more specific charge, and they're very specifically geared toward making progress and writing APIs or writing documentation around APIs. And so we have groups here covering audio and visual materials, a MAPS technical group that is a complement to the MAPS community group, a discovery technical group that is working on how to make it a little bit easier to discover and work with IIIF materials across institutional boundaries. And then the two newest technical groups are related to search and authentication. And the big pieces related to those groups is about bringing those API specifications in line with the 3.0 specifications that debuted in June of this year. And so all of these groups, I think it's important to say, they're all open to everyone. There's really no requirements or no barrier to entry. If you are interested in any of those groups, all those calls are open, and you can find the details on our website or get in touch with us. We're happy to connect you with those groups. Those groups are based on mutual respect and inclusion, and just really rooted in a commitment to sharing expertise and making a useful venue for sharing best practices and demos and things like that. We always have open notes and communication mechanisms, including our Slack channels. And then also to mention just other levels of how this works in the community. There's a group of folks called the editors. And so they actually take feedback from the community in the form of use cases and GitHub issues and other commentary on the specifications. And it's their job to make sure that it is all completely consistent, to make sure that that we've thought through all of the implications of any particular changes. So they're the ones responsible for actually editing the specification language. And then we have an advisory board, sort of a governance advisory board called our coordinating committee that helps us kind of make sure that we're being representative of the community and acting in ways that are kind of the most useful for the broadest number of people. And I've mentioned this group a couple of times, but just to say that the IIIF Consortium is quite literally the financial support of the staff and the community. So it's this set of 58 institutions that actually make planning possible, all the kind of continuing ongoing work to look ahead into the future and do some road mapping, all of that sort of thing. So the staff members I introduced earlier, we all work for the IIIF Consortium. And it provides some governance and oversight, including the executive and operating committees that are who we report to directly. And then there's a group called the Technical Review Committee, which when you join the IIIF Consortium as a full member, you are then given a spot on the Technical Review Committee, which is works with the editors and works with the cookbook group to make sure that changes make sense. They are the ones who actually vote on all the changes to the specifications. So maybe in our last little bit here, and then I want to leave plenty of time for questions, but how do I get started is kind of one of the early framing questions. And we like to say that you're already doing the right thing. You're here at the session, you're interested in the working meeting, and that is really like the best first step. So I've mentioned in this presentation all those different community groups and technical specification groups. If any of those sounded like topics that you're interested in, maybe that you're working on as part of your institution, then that's definitely a great way to get connected, even just to listen in on the conversations and see what folks are talking about. But at even a kind of a more beginning level, there's lots of other ways to get started too. So one thing we like to point to is just the really amazing ecosystem of software and tools and technologies that have integrated IIIF already. So this slide gives you kind of the logos of, this is by no means exhaustive. There are definitely other places not included on this slide, but just to give you a sense of all the different kind of tools and providers that you may already have access to that make IIIF material compliant, that you can connect with. Other ways to get in touch with us, to stay connected, just to find out more about what's happening in the community. I think the #1 recommendation I might make right now is to sign up for that newsletter. That's a really great way to just get a sense of what are new implementations, what are new technology tools that are being developed, what are the events that are happening in the next couple weeks. So that newsletter goes out once a month. It's kind of a very lightweight way of finding out what's going on in the community. So that's iiif.io/newsletter. And you can sign up there and easily stay in touch with us. And then we have some email groups. We have connections to those community groups. We have links down there at the bottom. And as I said, we're happy to talk with you if you have questions about what the best way might be to intersect with those. And then as kind of the last point here, what are some of the next steps beyond that? So kind of broken this out into steps you can take as an individual and steps you can take as maybe a representative of your institution. So individually, again, you're doing the right thing, you're attending events. We found that it's really valuable when people start considering themselves like advocates for IIIF at their own institution or within their own region. That starts to help build a local community of IIIF users and advocates that then can connect with kind of the larger global community. So attending conferences and events, if you let us know, we're happy to support you with, say, slides or other materials that might be relevant to your conference or event. Of course, connecting with us about ideas and use cases, joining the calls, whether it's the regular community calls or one of the community group meetings that I mentioned. And then I mentioned that too, the running a local event, once we get back to in-person events, or even if you want to do an online event, we can certainly help you with info and best practices from people who've done exactly that kind of thing before. And at the institutional level, you know, like I've said it before, but a lot of this work wouldn't be possible without the support of the members of the IIIF Consortium. So there are 2 levels that you can join the IIIF Consortium at. So there's a link there and we can provide that link to you as well. Talk about it at your institution, see if that's something that you can do and help support the work that we do. And, you know, it just kind of is a nice virtuous cycle. So the community supports us and we're able to leverage that and pour that support back into the community, back into events, back into development of the specifications and things like that. Talking to your software providers, if you are using software that's not already IIIF compliant, talking to them about how they might implement IIIF into their own tools. And of course, exposing your collections through IIIF and using IIIF compatible viewers and other software tools. And perhaps as importantly as doing all that, letting us know. So we're happy to include links to your new collections, or if you've made a new viewer or new kind of enticing user-facing page, please send us those links. We love hearing about it. We love featuring it in the newsletters and sending it out via Twitter. And you know, we're happy to help kind of promote and present as much as we can. It helps us talk about all the great work happening in the IIIF community. So I think you've probably gotten a good sense here, but we already have hundreds of adopters around the world. We're eager to take that into 2021 in the next couple of years and just add hundreds of more institutions making use of all these different applications. We know that there's more than 1 billion digital objects out there. We want to see if we can double that number in the coming years and just make IIIF even more of a global project than it already is. And so I'm going to pause there. I think, yeah, I talked for about 25 minutes. So let me stop sharing. I hope that all made sense, but we have about 10 or 12 minutes left here. So if you have any questions about anything that I was just talking about in that presentation or anything else, now's really an open floor. You know, if you have questions about the community or other ways to, you know, anything related to IIIF, we're happy to answer questions. And folks can either use the chat box baked into Zoom, or if you want, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the questions. Don't be shy. That's literally what the session is for, and so we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, can you hear me? My name is Monica. Hi.
Yeah, hi Monica, go ahead.
I just was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the level of participation of the institutions. Like, I know I'm working on a project that is using IIIF, but you know, are we trying to do this on like across an institutional level, specific project by project basis? Just a general talk about different levels of participation of people using this.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, I mean, you know, what I'll give you kind of my general impression, although it's been really interesting. The more adoption we see of IIIF, obviously the kind of bigger the range is that we've seen. But I would say what we've seen, the kind of traditional model is that, you know, I'll give an example, is that we've seen, you know, like someone in the take a research university as an example. We've seen that IIIF often is kind of first heard about or known about in, say, like the library IT side, or, you know, kind of the library technology group. But then as maybe the initial folks start talking about it, maybe do some, you know, proofs of concept, things like that, we're seeing like whole departments, whole cross institutional collaboration. So it's actually spreading way beyond just kind of university libraries now, as I mentioned in there, to like faculty and teaching instances. So, you know, we know of a couple of institutions that have internal email lists that are just about the use of IIIF at that institution. So I'm thinking of things like, you know, we've seen really interesting things coming from libraries that are guiding the implementations, but then are doing really great work to reach out to faculties, you know, at you know, kind of learning centers and other institutional projects outside the library, and making materials available like teaching guides and you know, other resources, just how-tos and things like that. So they're providing the infrastructure and then partnering with whole other parts of the institution to make the most of it, you know, to make the most use of it in kind of a user-facing presentation. I hope that maybe example sort of gave you a good sense, but let me know if I've missed it.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Sure, and you know, like that example is really the university library side, but we've seen the same thing, you know, on the museum side. It's very similar, where we've seen museums implement IIIF basically to solve their own problems, you know, just to stop reusing, to stop cutting thumbnails and doing a lot of duplicative work. But then once the museum technology side has done that implementation, we've seen curators and education departments really kind of respond to it and start doing things like guided viewing tours and making use of kind of the more advanced functionality. So yeah, it's been a nice kind of, we've seen it grow organically in a lot of institutional settings. Great question. Other questions that we can answer? Anything you're curious about? Great questions. There's a question in the chat about examples of interesting use cases for IIIF. So we can probably find a link to it. There is a kind of standard introduction deck, a little different than the one I just gave. This was more about community. We have a lot of recorded examples of AAAF interactions. So maybe we can find the link and paste that in the chat. Maybe Glenn or Meg can do that while I give some off the top of my head. But so examples we've seen are, you know, like this sort of a standard example that a lot of libraries are making links to AAAF materials right available, museums and libraries actually, right from search results. And that's kind of a standard use case. But then we start to get into really interesting use cases where, you know, we're seeing like some really neat interactions where people are presenting like shopping cart functionality, where from a set of search results, people can kind of add AAAF materials to a shopping basket or whatever you might think of it. But then they can take that entire basket and plug it into a viewer and then get a comparison experience, if that makes sense. Some other really interesting examples. There's a great project and set of efforts from the Center for Open Data in the Humanities in Japan that has what's called a curation viewer, which is another example of ways to bring in different assets and put it into kind of a single viewing experience, a curatorial viewing experience. There's really interesting work happening there around bringing in AAAF assets and then applying some artificial intelligence, things related to optical character recognition. That's some of the most advanced work I've seen. Really exciting uses of AAAF in that way. I'm trying to think of other really compelling things. There's a really neat exhibit. I don't know if folks have seen, the New York Times has done this series of like scrolling deep viewing, guided viewing experience. And so we've seen, let me see if I can find the link quickly. This is just a new tool that we've seen recently called exhibit.so, which kind of makes it easy to create those guided viewing experiences. If you have a set of AAAF manifests, you can kind of plug it into that tool and then create you know, kind of an easy guided experience. So off the top of my head, those are a few examples, but Meg have found a recording where we kind of give some of the most basic examples all the way through to some more interesting ones. Hope that answered the question. Great. Oh, and I didn't even mention any of the AV, the audiovisual things. That's kind of a new domain for AAAF. So there are some really interesting things happening where you can present audio and moving image materials and then annotate those audio and moving image materials. So we're seeing tools that do things like captioning and you know, navigation through transcription, things like that. So there's some interesting tools coming on that front too. But these are great questions. What else can we answer for you? Or actually, I'll, you know, if other folks have want to mention tools or great interactions, I'm happy to open the floor up for that too. Okay. Seems quiet, but are there any other, yeah, things on people's minds? Any questions about the process of this week or kind of how things are working? Yeah, let us know. And we have another maybe 5 or 6 minutes left in this session, so now's a good time. So there's a link there. Thank you, Peter. A link from the implementation happening at the University of Leeds. And there's a link to a presentation, which I don't know if I've seen or not, but more good leads there for folks to go take a look at in terms of implementations. And so actually, here's another element I realized maybe I should have included in the introduction lists. I'm trying to find the link real quickly here. We have a a great set of resources. If you're not familiar with it, I'm putting it in the chat now. It's called the Awesome IIIF list. So this is a community maintained kind of link list of resources, and it's broken out into sections. And so generally it's like a really great place to go if you are just sort of exploring. Maybe you want to take a look at different image servers, for example. It has a list there of all the different ones that we know about, or it has a section on tutorials and workshops. It has a section on just fun things you can do with IIIF. We call it, like fun experimental projects that aren't necessarily tied to scholarship or, implementations specifically. So the Awesome IIIF list is a great resource. We try to keep it up to date all the time. So if you know about tools or you take a look at that list and you think something's missing, then let us know, and we're happy to keep that list up to date. But that's a great resource, especially if you're just getting familiar with the different ways that IIIF can be useful to you. Other thoughts or questions?
I do actually have one more question now that I'm thinking
Sure.
through. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because I participated in the workshop, and we used Internet Archive to kind of experiment a little with our own images and such. So maybe I missed this with some of the examples, but is it appropriate for like individuals to use this with their own like personal materials, or is it more like focused on being backed by an institution or a larger collection?
Sure. Yeah. So that's a great question. So it is definitely true that the like driving factors have been very institutional. The use cases have been very much rooted in institutional use cases. Sorry, that was redundant. But so we've been solving problems for institutions for probably the last, however many years. We are now getting into an interesting phase where we're seeing more faculty or even unaffiliated scholars, folks who are more individuals looking for solutions. And so there are definitely ways to do it. And I think you saw in the workshop that, using free tools like the Internet Archive and a couple other cases, it's doable. I don't think there's an elegant solution yet. I will say that, like GitHub is probably the best way that we've seen. There are a couple ways to do kind of like static IIIF implementations just using GitHub storage. But I think that's an area where, I know that folks, places like St. Louis University and others are looking at ways to maybe make, like a sort of a workbench style tool available, something where an individual could save manifests, save annotations, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sure. This is great. Other questions we can answer for folks? And so now is a good opportunity, but it's not your only one. So I've said it before, but we are very happy to help you answer questions. We're happy to point you in the right direction or make connections within the community. So always feel free to reach out to us. You can reach us at events at iiif.io. That's an easy way, just connect it to this event or find us on Slack. There's any number of ways to do that. So I guess maybe we'll call it there. I hope that you all will take a look at the schedule for the remainder of the week. As we've said, some of the sessions talk about, some of the specifications, and there's a range of technical, technical connections within these sessions, but we really encourage you to join and sit in on those, even if it's just to listen and familiarize yourself, or it's really helpful to have a really wide set of institutions and people represented so that we have more and more use cases, making sure that all of those are represented at the different sessions. Maybe we'll pause there as a last chance for questions here. Otherwise, we'll take a pause before the next session starts at 11 a.m. or the top of the hour, I should say. It's 11 a.m. in my time zone. Last thoughts? Okay. Well, we're really grateful to have you join us here today, and we hope to see you during the rest of this week. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you soon.